welcome to the Impostor Syndrome Files. I'm Kim Menninger, and I am so grateful that you are here. It's now been more than a year since I started this podcast, and I can't tell you how much I've learned and grown from the conversations that we've had here. As you may have heard me share, I have struggled with imposter syndrome and anxiety for much of my life, so this is a very personal journey for me. I do this podcast because I want us to share our stories with each other and to stop suffering in silence. Imposter syndrome is a pretty universal human experience and nothing we should be ashamed of. By listening to or supporting this podcast, you're helping me to advance my mission of destigmatizing this conversation and making it safe for everyone to be vulnerable and get the support they need. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoy this podcast and would like to support this mission even further, please consider subscribing. And if you feel inclined to leave a 5-star review, this really does help raise the visibility of the podcast so that others can find us. And please consider sharing with your friends. Lastly, if you have a story you'd like to share, connect with me anytime. I would be happy to interview you. Thanks again for being here. Welcome, Candy. I am so excited to talk to you today, and I would love to kick us off by inviting you to introduce yourself.
Well, first of all, Kim, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I've been, listening to some of your episodes and 75 episodes and 2 seasons. I'm so impressed. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
Fantastic. Okay, so most people will know my name, at least if they're from the Boston area. I spent 25 years on the radio on a big radio station called Magic 106.7. And boy, did I love it. I loved my career, everything about it, except for the part where I had to get up at 3:30 in the morning. And, I had been on in the afternoon for most of my career. And it's always a big compliment when they move you to the morning, because that's where the ratings are. That's where the bonuses are. That's where you make the most money. Well, you might be listening to me thinking she's full of energy and, mornings would be great for her. Well, guess what? I have never been more exhausted in my entire life. So when my contract came to an end, I walked into the big boss's office and I said, I love you all very much, but I cannot get up at 3:30 in the morning anymore. And so I exited the station on all good terms, but then I started a whole new career as a podcaster and started my own production company. So I've been at it for about 6 years now. It's a whole different world, but I am a radio broadcaster through and through. I am forever a radio girl. I'm also a singer, and that's how I got into radio in the first place. And I am very proud to be a podcaster in 2021. It's an interesting frontier to be part of.
Oh, well, I am so excited to hear more about your story as we move forward. And it's so great to hear your voice in this conversation. I got so used to hearing you on the radio. So it's funny to be hearing you now in
Hold everything, Kim. Let me sing it. Magic 106.7.
That is great. And I would love to hear a little bit about your thoughts on imposter syndrome. That's why we're here to talk about some of the self-doubt that we face, especially as women, but certainly men experience this as well. Just as we're navigating the ups and downs of our careers, how has imposter shown up for you? Imposter syndrome?
It's such a great question. And I'll tell you, I'm one of those people, and I know this is going to be very surprising to you and to anyone who knows me, who really felt like I wasn't worth it. I had a little voice inside my head from the time I was a little girl. And that voice inside my head told me that I was a bad girl, that I wasn't worth it. And I struggled with that voice my entire career. And I'll tell you what, if you ever interview a performer, and like I said, I'm a singer. I started out as a singer, and that's what led me to radio. Many performers carry that weight around. And that's why they love the spotlight. That's why, because they're able to turn themselves into somebody else. But in their minds, that little voice is saying, you're not worth it. And that's the one that I carried around with me for most of my life. And I'm actually sitting here right now with a journal that is from August of 2012. And it was the first time that I ever wrote that down and started examining it for the very first time. And I wrote in my notes here from 2012, appreciate and validate your success. Step back and appreciate all the things you love so much. Abandon the need to convince anyone of your worth. Visualize yourself moving forward. Open yourself up to endless possibilities.
Wow. I love that. And tell me more about this examination process, because I know it's one thing to write those things down. It's another thing to believe them. It's another thing to actually get to a place where they feel real for you.
Exactly. And you know what? I think at that time in my life, I mean, my goodness, we're looking at, 10 years ago, almost, I guess I had reached a place in my life. Maybe it was a maturity piece where I finally was able to say, wait a second, stop that. Stop that voice inside your head. You are worth it. Look at what you've accomplished so far. Nobody told me. I told myself. I came to a place in my own journey as a woman, as a broadcaster, as a mother, as a wife, that this stupid voice needed to be silenced. And I think this is the first time that I ever wrote it down. But from that moment on, Kim, I'm here to tell you and your audience that I kind of put her in her place. And whenever I would hear that voice inside my head, I would say, no, you are worth it. Yes, you are successful. No, you don't need to prove yourself to anyone anymore.
Wow. That's amazing. That's really powerful. And it's something I think we could all benefit from doing, right? Because I think there's a lot of power in getting thoughts out in writing too. I think there's a lot that swirls around our busy heads, and just the ability to kind of crystallize and think a little bit more deeply in that translation process is
no doubt about it. I mean, I'm shaking my head as you're saying that. I call these things brain dumps. And I have, my goodness, in my office here in my home, I have a beautiful home studio now. I have notebooks. I always pick pretty ones, and they are filled with brain dumps. It's one thing to think something or have an idea. It's another thing to write it down on paper because it makes it real. And I'm not talking about your daily to-do list. I'm talking about your hopes and your dreams. I'm talking about almost like a daily vision board where you're writing things down. These are loftier goals than going to the dry cleaners or going to the grocery store. These are your hopes and your dreams, because I'm here to tell everyone who's listening to this fantastic podcast that we're here once. And this is our life. And if you've got dreams hidden down inside of you that you haven't taken out, written down, and put on paper, do it today.
Yeah. I love that you say that about it. We're only here once too, because like you said about that voice that's getting in your way, right? We don't have time for this, right?
And she's there for a lot of reasons. That's the same voice that stopped you from raising your hand in math class. It's just that as we grow older and we're in the workplace, or we're taking another step on the ladder towards success, that voice is the one that slows us down. And as you and I both know, as confidence coaches, that confidence, we're not born with it. We have to try to develop it every single day of our lives. Confidence is something that we have to practice. And when I became a confidence coach and started working with Alyssa DeVere, whom I know you love, and I've done the same thing, wow, I sat there saying, she is so right. And this is brain science, okay? And that's when I started talking about small wins, not just for myself, but for the people that I love and work with.
That's a great point too. I think small wins is a really great way to practice, like you said, in the everyday, because we get so caught up in these big monumental goals, or just we lose track of all the things that are going well.
Well, I remember having small wins explained to me so well, and I'll share it with your listeners. And the simple idea is this: we've just come off of watching the Olympic athletes. rising to such incredible accomplishments, okay? But an Olympic athlete or a professional athlete is very strategic about the way they practice. A marathon runner doesn't run a marathon every day. A swimmer doesn't swim 5,000 yards for no good reason. They break it up into segments so that these are small wins and they can feel the power of their body responding to the workout. And then their coach takes them to the next level and the next level and the next level. But again, a marathoner doesn't run a marathon every day. They run intervals. And so as women, instead of looking at that goal and listening to your voice saying, you can't really do that, change that voice to say, let me have an I can do it attitude. Let me take it one chunk, one step at a time. Baby steps are better than no steps at all. That's one of my favorite expressions.
I like that too. That's great. Now, let me ask you about your story. Being in radio, you obviously were very successful, but that the outward success doesn't always align with how we feel about ourselves. You mentioned the feelings of not feeling worth it. What was it like for you in that world?
Boy, it was a tough world for a lot of reasons. It's changing ever so slightly, but radio is not what it was when I left it 6 years ago. First of all, as I rose through the ranks, I have a very interesting story to share with everybody. I was first hired at Magic back in 1990 as the secretary to the program director. Why did I take that job? As a cum laude graduate of Boston College with a degree in English, a very accomplished singer and jingle singer and voiceover artist, because it was the only job available. It was a foot in the door, and my goal was to rise through the ranks. Well, about a year into my job, where I was learning so much and also sort of like just being a sponge, right? We had a disc jockey with a very bad habit of falling asleep on the radio. And he used to do the overnight shift on the weekend. And my boss said to me, if Gary falls asleep one more time, I'm going to have to let him go. Well, on a Thursday night, Gary fell asleep for the third time. And this poor guy had 6 children, all under 6, like boom, 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 boom. And by day, he was an exterminator. By night, he was a disc jockey. The poor guy just couldn't stay awake. So I had to send him. I called him up and I said, Gary, Dawn wants to talk to you. I'm so sorry. He comes in. It's Friday now, going into a summer weekend. He comes in and my boss fires him at about 5 o'clock on a Friday night in July. And then my boss comes walking into my office and taps me on the shoulder and says, you're on tonight. I'm looking around wondering who he could possibly be talking to. He said, you're gonna be great. And I said, oh, no. Please don't make me do that. Now, I'd been to broadcasting school. I had my license to broadcast, but I'd never been on the radio for a whole air shift by myself running the board. I'm having a nervous breakdown here, begging him not to make me. And the voice inside my head, what was it saying? Impostor syndrome. You can't do this, Candy. Who do you think you are? And my boss, who was my mentor and saw talent in me, said, yes, you can. And I showed up that night and I did that show. And let me tell you something. I'm sorry if I have to use this word. I sucked. I was terrible. Okay. I really was. And the show started at midnight and I didn't even speak until 3:15. I just kept on hitting commercials and running songs. And finally, my boss calls me up at 3:15 a.m. and says, excuse me, are you ever going to speak? And I said, oh, I didn't think you were listening. He said, of course I'm listening, right? Well, I dropped to my knees. I said a few prayers. I stood up. The song was over. I had to say a few words. And that was the beginning of my radio career. And Kim, I was on for the next 25 years of my life. Do you love that story?
I love that story. Wow.
And it tells so much about the imposter syndrome, doesn't it? Because I didn't think I could do it. And sometimes all you need is one person who believes in you and breaks through the chatter and says, yes, you can.
You're absolutely right. Yeah. And imagine if you hadn't what if your boss had said, okay, we'll choose someone else then?
Thank goodness he didn't, because I probably would have taken that out. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. And then as I started, being on the air all the time, it just opened me up to this whole new experience. I mean, I'm a performer. I love microphones. I've never met a microphone I did not love. Okay. And I'm playing songs that I know and love, and I have something to say about them and everything. It checked all my boxes. Now, the hard part was, get ready. When you start out as a secretary, there are people who want you to stay a secretary.
Yes.
And you have to prove to them that you know so much more. So one time after I got off the air, filling in for our midday woman, who was like the queen of the radio station, big success story. And we loved each other. Very good friend of mine. She was sick. I filled in for her. Well, it was my turn to answer the phones as the receptionist in the lobby, because I, as a secretary, had to take turns doing that. So here I am from 9 to noon saying Magic 106.7. That was Rod Stewart singing, playing Forever Young, blah, blah, blah. Hello, this is Magic 106.7. Can I help you? Oh, yes, sir. One moment, please. With them. Okay. Humbling.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that I want to talk about. Humility is a grace. It is a wonderful skill to have. It's just that we have to very, very carefully skirt the border between self-doubt and being humble. Don't you think?
Yes, that's a really, really good point. And I think humility comes with really powerful self-awareness. Right?
Yes, it certainly does. It certainly does. So the other part you asked me, what was hard? What was hard was, first of all, being doubted in the beginning. And it made me feel as if I had to turn the Titanic. When someone has an impression of you and you have to show them that you're worth so much more. So I had to dig down pretty deep and just keep on working really hard to climb that ladder. And I did. And over the course of those 25 years, obviously I was on the air every single day, but I was also a manager behind the scenes, and I was second in command. And so I very often found myself as the only woman in the room for very high level conversations about the future of the radio station, the music we were playing, the branding of the station, and the marketing. And it was always very interesting to hear a lot of men telling me how women felt about the music. Because I would just be like, you people should not be talking. But again, you got to learn to play the game. And I did. But I always made sure that I spoke my truth about what I thought to be what was the best direction for the station based on my love of it and my knowledge of radio and of programming. But it took a while to have my voice be listened to.
Oh, I bet. Yeah. I mean, especially there's so many interesting elements to your story, right? Like you said, when you're trying to reinvent yourself from being a secretary where everyone has come to build a relationship with you in a very specific way, and now to be in these rooms with these powerful decision makers, right? I'm sure that takes some getting used to for these people that are talking with you.
And I'll tell you what else it takes. It takes self-control because I had to choose my words and choose my battles carefully. And that's true for anybody's rise, no matter what industry you're in. Sometimes we have to pick our words very carefully, choose our spots, and really understand that it's all about self-control. It's all about, sometimes it's about serendipity. Sometimes it's about good timing. Sometimes we wonder, how did she get to where she is today? What's that all about? Well, we don't know her backstory. And I'm also a big believer, we haven't really talked much about this, Kim, but I'll throw it in there. I'm such a big believer of really supporting each other. Women really need to help each other rise. And if we don't, then shame on us for sure.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And this is unfortunately a very common theme nowadays, is women not supporting women. And I always think about that as disappointing as it is to hear, and as frustrating as it is to be in that situation, I always think about it from the perspective of the woman who isn't supporting other women, and how lonely it must be for them to be so afraid to support other women that they have to protect themselves so much.
I wonder if they've got a imposter syndrome thing going on.
Yes.
I think it's those of us who are confident in our success who are more than willing to give a leg up to mentor as much as we possibly can. It's so important that we do that.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, people who are confident don't bully other people, right? So
right. You are so right.
So talk a little bit about this transition that you made. So you're in radio for all these years, and now here you are as a podcaster.
That was hard, Kim. That was damn hard. Well, here's the thing. When you are on the radio, particularly in a big major market like Boston is, it's a top 10 market. You've got about 2 million people listening to you. I was on multiple stations that were owned by the same owner. And so, in the afternoon, if I were doing news, traffic, and weather, which I often did, I would go from one station to the other and plug in my headphones, deliver that report or that newscast, and then jump to the next station. And so you're really listening. People are hearing you, 2 million a week. Okay. Then all of a sudden that gigantic megaphone of radio goes away from you like that. Mm. And the silence is overwhelming. Now, fortunately, because I was on the air for so long, I had something called high name recognition. And when you have a name like Candy, it's memorable. And O'Terry is a very unique last name. And Candy O is very memorable. Mm-hmm. So wherever I went, people would remember me. Now, what was really a phenomenon that I must say is for the first 3 or 4 years, everywhere I went, and I always made sure that I continued hosting events and keeping myself out there, because in any entertainment industry, you are a trivia question in 6 months. Mm-hmm. If you don't work it, you got to work it. Okay. So I knew that. So I was signing myself up to do, hosting events for free just to keep myself out there. Then I'd be in front of 500 people, 1,000 people, whatever. And I'm telling you, for the first 3 or 4 years, people would be like, I heard you this morning. And I'd be like, oh, you did? Oh yeah. I listen to you every morning. I love you. Oh, and in the beginning, I would correct them and say, oh, no. I've been off the air since April 1st. And then I said to myself, why are you doing that? Just say thank you. Thank you very much. Last week, Kim, I got a letter from someone saying, Dear Candy, can you please tell me why Magic 106.7 doesn't tell you the name of the song and the artist who sings it anymore? I responded, Dear so-and-so, I'm so sorry. I have not been on the station in 6 years. Okay. Thank you for listening. All right. So on the one hand, when I made my transition, people knew my name. They knew my skill set. They were happy to use me as a host. But the challenge was, how am I going to kind of harness all the things that I'm really good at and turn the page to another chapter? And everybody kept on telling me, you should get into podcasting. And I thought, well, I'm a radio broadcaster. I'm not a podcaster. And I was kind of looking down my nose at this whole podcasting thing. Well, guess what? I discovered this is so exciting for so many reasons, because people like you and thousands and thousands and thousands of others are able to share their expertise in an open global setting, sounding really awesome. I was like, wait a minute, this is great. So I decided to take my original idea for the Exceptional Women program on Magic 106.7, which is the winner of more awards than any other program in the history of commercial radio, which was my creation. So I couldn't take it with me because it belongs to the station. So I thought, well, I'm just going to rip off my own idea. I'm going to call it The Story Behind Her Success. So there. So I'm 176 episodes in, I think.
Oh,
and I'm loving every minute of it. And I've always said this, there is no shortage of great women with incredible stories to tell, as you know only too well. And most of the women that you interview will say to you, oh, I'm not exceptional. I'm not fantastic. And that's like, ooh, good, check. Because they're so humble and their stories are so amazing. So I have my own production company and I have a show called The Story Behind Her Success. I also have a short series, which is 24 episodes long, called The Speaker Coach, where I share my expertise as a public speaker with the world. And also you get free downloadable tip sheets for every episode. So check that out, The Speaker Coach. And then my latest baby, which is called Country Music Success Stories.
Ooh, that sounds
so exciting.
Wow, that's exciting.
Well, I've always loved country music, and I have a wonderful partner who's doing the show with me named Jacy Dawn Valeras, who's a singer-songwriter who lives in Nashville. And we go into the homes of superstars and country music icons, and we sit face to face with them, practicing social distancing.
Of course.
In their favorite location, whether that's their living room, their dining room, their back porch, their recording studio. And they tell us how they got to where they are today.
Wow.
Amazing.
Oh, I love it. I can't wait to listen.
Country music success stories.
And we'll put all these links in the show notes too, for anybody else who wants to access the resources that you're sharing with us.
Thank you.
Do you have any, I know that you've been really focused on helping and being of service in this space too, around confidence and speaking. Do you have any other thoughts that you would share with somebody who's feeling like, I'm just not good enough? I have a dream, I have a goal, and I'm not worth it.
I want you to write it down and make it real. I want you to look at it every single day and ask yourself, what one thing have I done today that brings me closer to that dream or that goal, no matter how small that step may be? My mother used to have an expression that I will share with everybody today. She said, if you sit in the corner and you never get up and you feel sorry for yourself, you will be in the same place tomorrow as you are today. It's the one step that makes all the difference. Just take one step.
I love that. Thank you so much. I'm writing this down. That is great. Thank you so much, Candy. This has been so much fun. I have absolutely loved talking with you today. And I think there's so much value to your insights and such an inspirational story.
Thank you very much. And I'm really delighted to have been on the show, and congratulations on your success in building this podcast. You've got great content, and I wish you all the luck in the world.
Thank you. Thanks again for listening. If you'd like to stay connected, please join the Leading Women discussion group, which meets every Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern. This is a place where women come together to discuss questions or challenges related to leadership development and career management. It's a great place to learn from, support, and connect with other women on similar journeys. In addition to the weekly calls, we also have a Facebook group and a Slack channel where we stay connected and support each other. Please join us there too. You can check out the show notes for the links. Before we wrap up, if you like this podcast, I would love to share another podcast with you that I know you will enjoy. Do you ever find yourself playing small? Do you want to take risks, but in the end, you end up taking the safe route? Does your inner critic keep you from reaching your full potential? As counterintuitive as it often feels, we don't become confident first and then take action. It's through our actions that we build our confidence. That's why one of the greatest ways to manage imposter syndrome is by taking brave and bold action. If you want inspiration and insights to help you to take action and to be brave at work, then my friend and colleague Jen Pastikas's Brave Women at Work podcast is for you. Jen and I met when we interviewed each other for our podcasts, and I knew instantly that Jen and I shared a similar worldview and a commitment to empowering women to be our best selves. On her podcast, Jen digs into common challenges such as perfectionism, boundary setting, and burnout, all to empower us to shift our mindsets and play bigger in the workplace. You can find the Brave Women at Work podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and Spotify. Visit the show notes for the relevant links. Thanks again, and please stay in touch.